Hi everyone, my name is Zach Bartonslogger and I'm the Extension Associate for Youth Livestock Programs in the state of Kentucky. Today we will be going over video number 4, Goat Evaluation, in our 5-part video series over the basics of livestock judging. As with each week, I want to remind ourselves of the objectives that we're trying to cover. We're identifying priorities as it pertains to species, this week being goats. We're also enhancing evaluation methods. Before we get started, I thought that it would be good to go over some general thoughts on goats. Typically, people have some apprehension or a little bit more nervous when they go to evaluate goats, or for some people this is the case simply because we just haven't seen them a whole lot. And I think it is becoming a lot more common now in most contests, and in fact, virtually all contests that you'll go to, you'll probably see a breeding doe class, and actually even starting to see some market goats as well. But those goats are going to be Boer or Boer goat crosses, so meat goats. Those goats, just think about them having the body type of hogs, and then we want them to have the pattern of sheep. So the muscle and power and the width that we see in hogs a lot of times, especially the chest floor, I think is so important. We talk about a lot in the skull shape. And then also, though, we want them to be kind of that elegant look that we'll see a lot of times in sheep, that real elevated, kind of linked out type look to them. So the biggest advice that I can give you before going in and discussing goats further is just don't overthink it. You've gotten to this point and you're proficient at the other species, and so don't think about goats as being something that's tough or harder than what it is. And typically the classes that are pulled out for you in a livestock judging contest, those goat classes are pulled out with a specific idea in mind, and it's not just 4 animals pulled out at random. So again, just kind of take a deep breath and realize that they're just a small ruminant animal, and that there is logic to the classes that are brought forth to you. Similar to our discussion with sheep, we need to have kind of the same discussion here with goats as far as industry fundamentals go. Remember in the sheep industry where we said it was highly segmented, the goat industry, I took out the word highly, and I think it's just now segmented. It's not as to the extreme maybe as what we see in the sheep industry, but I do think there's still maybe 2 different segments within the goat industry. And so to talk about the first one, the purebreds, or a lot of times you'll have, notice the quotation marks there, but more breeding type goats, and those are goats with either seed stock or commercial targets. Their body type is typically real production oriented and just not as extreme. Still very good animals. Again, just like last time, not taking a stance one way or another, what's right or what's wrong. Those goats, you'll typically see them just a little bit larger in terms of their stature, and they'll typically just be a little more production-like in terms of their body and build, and just kind of look maybe to have a little more depth of body and not as extreme in areas. Weather type, those are goats that are targeted for production of show wethers. Terminal extreme pieces are bred for and are points of consideration. This is very similar to what we talked about the last time for sheep. The same can be said for goats. You'll see sometimes they'll call them weather dam classes as well, but they are really, or weather doe classes, they're really focused towards just kind of more the terminal aspect and the muscle power and just those extreme unique pieces. So we'll see a couple of examples that I brought forth, but again, kind of have this in the back of your mind. So a couple of those examples are provided here for you, 2 does that are just different in how they're presented and brought forth to us. You can see the doe on the left-hand side here is one that has plenty of length, growth, and performance to her, just in terms of her size and stature, and you can notice that body depth. Notice too that she's still got plenty of muscle to her, but the way that her muscle lays into her body is just a tick different. I would call it more volume, just the robustness in her rib cage and stuff of that nature, and just her muscle pattern is a little bit different. Compare the doe on the right here. The doe on the right is extreme in terms of some of her parts and pieces and very unique. Her muscle pattern is just a little bit different in terms of how she comes out of her hip and down into her lower leg there you can see. And then also maybe she just doesn't have that same kind of body depth that the other one has. Foot and bones real big, and her skull shape is really good. So again, just some differences between those two does. Again, I don't think it's extreme differences, but I do think there is a little bit of difference. And if you'll talk to people within the industry, they'll certainly tell you that there is perhaps, a difference, of what type of doe that you're looking at. And, I think it's just something to keep in mind and keep in the back of your head as you're going to sort a class, just like we talked about with the breeding sheep, is to make sure you understand what kind of animal has been brought to you, so that you can properly evaluate them and make sure you get them lined up the right way. So again, just some differences there I thought I'd point out before we get started. As we move into discussing breeding goats, we've got our priorities there listed on the left-hand side, and hopefully we don't need those priorities listed out for us anymore. Hopefully they're in the back of our mind just kind of subconsciously, but again, it is function first, muscle second, and then balance is our third priority. Just like the other three species that we've discussed so far, structural integrity comes to the forefront of function within breeding goats. And so angles are going to stay the same as what we've discussed before. Think about those 45-degree angles. Think about our top line, trying to stay as level and consistent as possible. The hock and pastern placement needs to have the right kind of curve and bend there as well. Something to keep in the back of your mind is that although the goat industry has made tremendous strides, there's still some aspects of it that, in terms of goats that need to be fixed. One point of emphasis is that, the hip structure is not exactly the way that perhaps we want to see that. And I think that that's starting to get a lot better. But we just need to have that in the back of our mind, that they're not going to be 100% perfect down their top line, and certainly out of their hip they're going to have a bit more gentle type roll there, and so just something to keep there in the back of your mind, and understand that we are trying to get them to the closest ideal as possible. We're trying to get them to look kind of like a sheep there from the side view, but perhaps they're not there yet, and so we can be forgiving at times of that. I think the doe that's down here below does a really nice job in terms of her slope of her shoulder. Her top line, you can notice, has a little roll to it, but again, we're forgiving of that. Certainly her hip we're forgiving of, but the right kind of angle there to her hock and pastern. So just a real nice doe, I think, from a structural standpoint. The other part of functionality in breeding goats is to talk about boldness of rib cage. This would be similar to what we've talked about with fleshing ability, roundness of rib, stuff of that nature. And so again, we're going to just study them in terms of true rib shape right in behind their shoulder. We want that to be a bold type shape to them. Similar to sheep, I don't think that they've got to have as much in terms of depth of body, although it's an added bonus, especially some softness there at their flank. It helps out from a balance standpoint, but just for them to be functional animals, they definitely have to have that right kind of curvature and rib shape in them. The doe that's provided here has that type of look to her without a doubt. So just a good image to get in your mind as far as what they should look like in terms of the boldness of rib cage. Muscle is our second priority of breeding goats, and it's not much different than other species we've talked about. They've got to be wide at the ground, and similar to hogs, we want them to have plenty of chest width, and we'll study them at great length in terms of how wide they are in their chest and their chest floor, what that looks like. We want to make sure that they're square in terms of how they set to the ground. All of that will allow them to transmit muscle back behind their shoulder, some width and expansion coming out through their hip, and the turn coming down into their leg. And we want to study them for volume, especially on breeding goats. Volume is a big thing, but they still have to have some shape to them as well, to pass on to the next generation. Another indicator of muscle is their skull shape. Something that we haven't talked about as much. We talked a little bit on hogs, but the width that they have in between their eyes and just kind of the broadness of their skull a lot of times will help tell the tale if they're a muscular animal or not. Typically animals that are a little bit narrower in terms of their skull shape, they typically are flatter and more closed up in terms of their body cavity. So that's another way or something, tip or trick that can help you out when studying for muscle within breeding goats. Balance is our third priority in breeding goats. Not to sound like a broken record, but you've heard a lot of these before in other species of what we're looking for. We want to see them to be elevated at the point of their shoulder or at the top of their shoulder. We want to see them with a very shallow chest or shallow sternum. And kind of progress deep back into their flank line to help give them that illusion that they're running uphill. We want them to be level in their top line. This particular doe, I think, does a really nice job of that. They've got to have some foot and bone to them. And the word fresh is something that we can bring up as well. I think they've just got to have a fresh appearance to them, just good in terms of their hair coat. Good in terms of just having a youthful appearance to them, not that they're older and staler in terms of their appearance. So again, those are some things to keep in the back of your mind. This particular doe, very good in terms of the elevation to her body, great in terms of her levelness down her top, and just having kind of a youthful appearance to her, very fresh in terms of her appearance, is good from that standpoint. Another point of consideration, although perhaps not a placing factor, but something we need to make note of and pay attention to, and then also bring it up in our set of reasons if we have it as a reasons class, is to look for goats that have the right jaw set to them. We can see that sometimes they'll have a parrot mouth. They could have a monkey mouth, but more often than not, we'll see parrot mouths, just like what we've talked about in sheep. But we'll want to make sure, even if it's a loose class, a doe class, that we're studying their head and we're coming down into their jaw and making sure it looks like they have the right bite, not an over or under bite. We want to make sure that they're normal in terms of their jaw set. As we dive into our market goat priorities, a reminder that we'll look for carcass value first. We'll talk about what that looks like in relation to maybe other species. Then we want to search for function, and then finally balance on those market goats as well. Carcass value on market goats is our first priority, and compositional correctness is a point of consideration, just like the other three species that we've talked about thus far. If I would tell you, I think goats are more similar to sheep or market lambs from how they're built and how we want them to be from a compositional standpoint. Obviously, we want them to be muscular first. They have to be wide and opened up and have plenty of muscle on their foundation. And then after that, we want them to have finish, but not too much finish. In fact, we want them to be more on the leaner side of things. We want them to have a defined shape and curvature to them. It is important that you go in and handle those market goats when you're given the option. And in most cases, you will be given the option to go in and handle for real muscle, or is it, some counterfeit muscle, fat that's laying on their body. It is also important to realize that goats are going to handle a little bit different from sheep. For the most part, they're a little thicker hided and it's looser hided as well. Although this has been started to be bred out of them, but a lot of times they will still have maybe just a little extra skin to them And so something to keep in the back of your mind too when you go to handle them. Goats are different in the sense of how they lay fat onto their body. They actually get fat from the inside first, then to the outside. So from internally, then to externally. So if you find a goat that's really soft in terms of their body cover, in terms of the finish that they have, if they got too much, then you can expect that goat to be very, very fat, and a lot of waste and trim will have to go into that one when they hit the cooler. So we want them to be muscular. We want them to be lean in terms of their composition. Both of these wethers that are presented here are both very muscular. Both of them had the right shape and tone in terms of leanness of muscle, especially the one on the left here, where you can see just some of those seams and just the tone of muscle that lays on that one's body is very, very good. So just two examples here for you to look at. Function in market goats is our second priority. They've got to have the right angles under them, like we've talked about before, 45 degrees, and having the right curve and venature at their hock and pastern, but then also plenty of rib shape in them as well. That boldness of rib or boldness of body is very important. The wether that's presented here, I think, does a nice job of portraying kind of that functional build, that functional type of feet and leg structure, and the right type of rib shape in him as well. Our final priority in market goats is balance. Balance, again, is similar to what we've already talked about within goats, is that we want them to have added elevation. We want them to have length of body and levelness of body. We want them to have a fresh look to them. We want them to have a shallow chest that progresses back into a deeper flank line if possible. One thing to keep in the back of your mind is that they don't have to have an abundance of depth of body. They just need to have at least the right type of line that's running from their chest back into their flank line. And they need to just have that uphill type look. I think this wether in particular really has kind of that uphill going forward type look to him. They need to have some foot and bone to them. And they need to be fresh in terms of their appearance. But that kind of does it for us on our discussion of goats for today in our fourth video series. I know it was a bit shorter of a video series, but as we get towards the end of this now, a lot of this we've already talked about in other species, and it's more just now reassuring you on goats and making sure that you're comfortable with it. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or to contact me by phone. Our fifth and final video series will be a live Zoom conference where you can tune in and listen to the presentation over oral reasons. And then after that, we'll have a live Q&A that you can ask questions, and it can be over anything. It doesn't have to be just from that day going over oral reasons. So it's been fun. I hope everyone is still doing well during this time. I hope that you can tune in there on May 21st, Thursday, May 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the live Zoom session to go over oral reasons, and then a live Q&A over anything that we've discussed over the past 4 weeks. Thank you.